pregnant mother bear was chained to a tree, crying for help. What this human baby did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. The morning sun barely peeked through the thick forest canopy as Olivia Parker carried her 14-month-old daughter, Emma, through the hiking trail. Behind them, Olivia's husband, Nathan, struggled with their camping gear, his breathing heavy as they searched for the perfect spot to pitch their tent. The family had planned this weekend getaway for months, desperate to escape their busy city lives and reconnect with nature. "I think I see a clearing up ahead," Olivia called back to her husband, adjusting Emma on her hip. The baby girl giggled, her tiny hands reaching for the colorful leaves dancing in the gentle breeze. As they approached the open space, the soft sound of whimpering cut through the peaceful forest ambiance. At first, Olivia thought it might be the wind or perhaps another camper's dog. But as they stepped into the clearing, the source of the heart-rending noise became clear, and the sight before them froze their blood. Chained to a massive oak tree was a large brown bear, her fur matted with mud and what looked horribly like dried blood. Her swollen belly made it obvious she was pregnant, likely not far from giving birth. The heavy metal chain was secured tightly around her neck, digging painfully into her flesh. Each time the bear moved, she let out a pained cry that sounded almost human in its desperation. "Nathan," Olivia whispered, instinctively clutching Emma closer to her chest. "We need to go. Now." Nathan stood rooted to the spot, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. "Who would do something like this?" he whispered back, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle the suffering animal. The bear's eyes, filled with a deep, sorrowful intelligence, locked onto the family. There was no aggression in her gaze, only pain, fear, and something that looked strangely like pleading. She tugged weakly at the chain again, releasing another mournful cry that echoed through the trees. Emma, who had been quiet until now, suddenly began squirming in her mother's arms. "Emma, shh," Olivia soothed, trying to turn away from the distressing scene. But the baby was insistent, twisting her little body and reaching toward the chained bear with determination. "Da!" Emma called out, her first attempt at a word sounding strangely clear in the hushed clearing. "Da! Da!" The bear went still, her dark eyes focusing intently on the small human-making sounds in her direction. For a moment, time seemed to stop in the forest. The birds fell silent. The wind held its breath. Even the sunlight appeared to pause, suspended in golden streaks between the leaves. What happened next would be burned into Nathan and Olivia's memories forever, a moment so unexpected and profound that neither would ever be able to speak of it without tears welling in their eyes. Emma, with the innocent fearlessness that only a baby could possess, somehow wriggled free from her mother's protective grasp and tumbled to the soft forest floor. Before either parent could react, she was crawling across the clearing, directly toward the chained bear. "Emma!" Olivia screamed, her heart nearly stopping as her precious child moved toward what could only be deadly danger. Nathan lunged forward, but in his panic he tripped over their camping gear and fell hard, watching in horror as his daughter continued her determined journey toward the wild animal. The bear watched the approaching baby with widening eyes, her massive body tensing. Olivia was certain they were about to witness their worst nightmare. But instead of aggression, the bear lowered herself to the ground, almost as if trying to appear less frightening to the tiny human inching closer. Emma, oblivious to the danger, or perhaps sensing something the adults couldn't comprehend, continued forward with unwavering determination. Her little hand reached out as she neared the bear, fingers extended toward the creature that could end her life with a single swipe of massive claws. The forest held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Time seemed to slow as Emma's tiny hand finally made contact with the bear's mud-caked fur. Nathan, scrambling to his feet, felt his heart hammering against his ribs like a war drum. Olivia stood paralyzed, a silent scream frozen in her throat, tears streaming down her face as she waited for the inevitable tragedy to unfold. But instead of violence, they witnessed something miraculous. The mother bear, her eyes glistening with what looked eerily like tears, remained completely still as Emma's small palm rested on her matted coat. The baby girl made a soft cooing sound, patting the bear's fur as if trying to comfort her. The bear responded with a gentle rumble. Not a growl of threat, but almost like a purr of acknowledgement. "Nathan," Olivia whispered, afraid that even her breath might shatter this impossible moment. "What's happening?" Nathan shook his head, equally mesmerized by the scene before them. "I don't know," he replied, his voice barely audible. "It's like she understands." Emma babbled happily, now using both hands to touch the bear's face with an innocent tenderness that brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. The chain around the bear's neck rattled slightly as she shifted, revealing raw, infected skin beneath the metal collar. "We have to help her," Nathan said suddenly, his initial fear transforming into determination. "I can't just walk away from this." Olivia nodded, her maternal instincts extending beyond her own child to encompass the suffering animal before them. "But how? That chain looks industrial strength." Nathan carefully approached, moving slowly so as not to startle the bear. Emma continued her gentle pats, creating a bizarre bridge of trust between human and animal. As Nathan got closer, he noticed something that made his blood boil with rage. The chain was secured with a heavy padlock, meaning this was no accident or natural occurrence. Someone had deliberately chained this pregnant animal here, leaving her to suffer or die. "I have bolt cutters in the truck," he whispered, "about half a mile back. I'll run and get them." "You can't leave us here," Olivia protested, her eyes wide with lingering fear despite the bear's current docility. Before they could decide what to do, a sharp crack of a twig behind them caused them all to freeze. Nathan spun around to find himself face to face with a bearded man in dirty camouflage clothing, holding a rifle pointed directly at them. "Step away from my property," the man snarled, his bloodshot eyes darting between the family and the bear. "Your property?" Nathan echoed in disbelief, instinctively positioning himself between the stranger and his family. "You did this," the man spat on the ground. "Bear gallbladder fetches a high price on the black market. Even higher for cubs. Was going to wait till she gave birth before harvesting." Olivia felt physically ill at the casual cruelty in the man's voice. Emma, sensing the tension, began to whimper, her hand still resting on the bear's fur. "You can't do this," Nathan said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "It's illegal. It's inhumane. It's none of your business," the poacher interrupted, raising his rifle slightly. "Now, take your kid and get out of my forest before I decide you've seen too much." The threat hung in the air like poisonous smoke. Olivia slowly moved toward Emma, intending to retrieve her daughter. But to everyone's surprise, the mother bear shifted her massive body, positioning herself between the baby and the armed man. A low, warning growl rumbled from her throat, not directed at Emma or her parents, but at the man with the gun. The poacher's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in anger. "Stupid animal," he muttered, adjusting his aim toward the bear. "Guess I'll have to speed up my timeline." Nathan saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger and acted without thinking. He launched himself forward with a desperate yell, crashing into the poacher just as the rifle discharged. The bullet went wild, splintering the bark of a nearby tree. The two men tumbled to the ground, wrestling for control of the weapon. Olivia screamed, torn between rushing to her husband's aid and retrieving her child, who remained frighteningly close to the now agitated bear. The situation had spiraled into chaos in seconds, and time seemed to fragment into terrifying, disconnected moments. Nathan grappling with the armed poacher, Emma crying in confusion, the bear rising to her full, intimidating height, her chain rattling ominously. Just when it seemed the situation couldn't get more dire, another sound cut through the clearing, the high-pitched wail of a police siren, followed by shouts and the crashing of footsteps through underbrush. "Police! Drop the weapon!" a commanding voice called out. The forest suddenly filled with uniformed officers, their arrival as unexpected as it was timely. The poacher, momentarily distracted by their appearance, loosened his grip on the rifle just enough for Nathan to wrench it away and scramble backward. A female officer, her hand steady on her holstered gun, took in the bizarre scene. A family with a toddler, a chained and clearly pregnant bear, and a man with a hunting rifle during closed season. Her trained eyes quickly assessed and categorized the situation. "We received reports of illegal hunting and poaching in this area," she explained, her gaze hard as she looked at the bearded man now being restrained by two other officers. "Seems we arrived just in time." As the poacher was handcuffed and led away, spitting curses and threats, the lead officer turned her attention to the chained bear. Her expression softened with compassion as she saw the animal's condition. "I'm Officer Diane Matthews with Wildlife Protection," she introduced herself. "We've been tracking this poaching operation for weeks. You folks all right?" Nathan nodded numbly, still processing the rapid turn of events. The bear. She protected our daughter. Somehow she knew the real threat wasn't us. Officer Matthews approached the bear cautiously, her trained eyes assessing the animal's condition. "She's severely dehydrated and malnourished, and very close to giving birth." She pulled out a radio. "We need the wildlife rescue team here ASAP with tranquilizers and medical support." While they waited for the specialized team to arrive, Olivia finally gathered the courage to retrieve Emma. To everyone's amazement, the bear made no move to prevent her, instead watching with what could only be described as trust as the mother collected her child. Emma fussed and reached back toward the bear, as if reluctant to leave her new friend. "Children have a way of sensing things we adults miss," Officer Matthews remarked, watching the interaction with fascination. "Your daughter somehow knew this bear wouldn't hurt her." "But why?" Olivia asked, cradling Emma close. "Any wild animal, especially one in pain, should have been aggressive." The officer shook her head in wonder. "I've worked with wildlife for 15 years, and sometimes they still surprise me. Animals sense intention and emotion in ways we don't fully understand. Perhaps she recognized that your family meant to help, not harm." Within 20 minutes, a specialized wildlife rescue team arrived. They carefully tranquilized the bear to safely remove the chain and provide immediate medical treatment. As they worked, the leader of the team approached the family with news. "She's going to make it," he assured them. "We'll transport her to our sanctuary where she can give birth safely. It looks like she's carrying 3 cubs based on our preliminary examination." Nathan put his arm around Olivia's shoulders, both of them overcome with emotion. "What would have happened if we hadn't found her?" Olivia asked, her voice breaking. The wildlife specialist's expression darkened. "Bears chained like this usually don't survive more than a few days. Between dehydration, starvation, and exposure, it's a cruel death. Your family didn't just save 1 life today, you saved 4. As the rescue team prepared to transport the sedated bear, Emma began to cry inconsolably, reaching toward the animal with desperate little hands. Nathan and Olivia exchanged a look of understanding. "Will we be able to visit her?" Nathan asked the specialist. "Our daughter seems to have formed some kind of bond." The man smiled. "Usually, we don't allow visitors to the rehabilitation areas, but in this case, I think we can make an exception. This is quite an extraordinary circumstance." 2 weeks later, the Parker family stood outside a large, natural enclosure at the wildlife sanctuary. The mother bear, now named Hope by the sanctuary staff, had safely delivered 3 healthy cubs just days after her rescue. Her wounds were healing, her coat regaining its luster as proper nutrition and care worked their magic. Emma squealed with delight as she spotted Hope through the protective viewing window, bouncing excitedly in her father's arms. The bear, as if sensing their presence, looked up from where she was nursing her cubs. For a long moment, she gazed directly at the family, particularly at Emma, with eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding that transcended the barriers between species. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered Dr. Leanne Carter, the sanctuary's lead veterinarian who had been caring for Hope. "She's always agitated when people approach, except with your family, especially your daughter. It's as if she remembers." Olivia wiped tears from her eyes as she watched the bear mother tenderly nuzzling her cubs. "Some connections don't need words or even the same species," she said softly. "Sometimes compassion speaks a universal language." As they prepared to leave, the sanctuary director approached them with news. The poacher had been convicted on multiple wildlife trafficking charges and would serve a significant prison sentence. Additionally, the case had drawn national attention, raising awareness about illegal wildlife trafficking and leading to increased funding for anti-poaching efforts. "Your family did more than save one bear," the director told them. "You've helped change the story for countless animals. We've named one of Hope's female cubs Emma in honor of your daughter." Nathan smiled, watching his own Emma press her small hand against the glass, mirroring the gesture she had made in that forest clearing. On the other side, Hope raised her head, meeting the child's gaze with what could only be described as recognition. In that moment, surrounded by strangers wiping away tears at the beautiful connection they were witnessing, the Parkers understood they had been part of something truly extraordinary, a reminder that compassion, even from the smallest among us, held the power to heal, to save, and to transform. 6 months passed, and the Parker family settled back into their routine in the city. The events in the forest had changed them profoundly. Nathan had quit his high-stress corporate job to work for an environmental nonprofit. Olivia had started a blog documenting their experience, which had gained thousands of followers interested in wildlife conservation. Little Emma, now approaching her 2nd birthday, had developed a remarkable fascination with bears, clutching a stuffed bear toy that looked uncannily like Hope wherever she went. Their monthly visits to the sanctuary had become a family tradition, a pilgrimage of sorts to witness the continued recovery of Hope and her growing cubs. The sanctuary staff had come to expect them, always making special arrangements for their visits. Dr. Carter had even begun collecting data on the unique interspecies bond, documenting how Hope's stress hormones decreased significantly whenever Emma was present. It was during one such visit, on a crisp autumn day, that their lives took another unexpected turn. "There's something I need to show you," Dr. Carter said, her expression unusually serious as she greeted them at the sanctuary entrance. "We've made a discovery that I believe concerns your family directly." She led them not to the familiar viewing area but to her office, where she unlocked a drawer and pulled out a weathered metal box. "When we arrested the poacher, authorities searched his cabin deep in the forest," she explained, setting the box on her desk. Most of what they found was evidence of illegal wildlife trafficking, but this... She paused, opening the box to reveal old photographs and yellowed newspaper clippings. This tells a different story. Nathan and Olivia leaned forward, confused by the relevance of these old documents. Emma squirmed in Nathan's arms, more interested in seeing Hope than looking at papers. The man who chained Hope wasn't just any poacher, Dr. Carter continued, spreading the photographs across her desk. His name is Victor Harmon, and his family has a history with bears that goes back generations. The photographs showed a younger version of the poacher standing next to various men with similar features, presumably his father and grandfather. In several images, dead bears were displayed as hunting trophies. The newspaper clippings told fragmented stories of bear attacks, hunting expeditions, and local legends. Victor's grandfather was mauled by a bear in 1967, Dr. Carter explained, pointing to a hospital photograph of a severely injured man. He survived, but developed an obsessive hatred for the animals. He passed this hatred to his son, and then to Victor, teaching them that bears were demons that needed to be exterminated. Olivia frowned, struggling to understand. But why chain a pregnant bear? Why not just... She couldn't finish the sentence, unwilling to speak of killing in front of Emma. Dr. Carter's expression darkened. According to Victor's journals, which were also recovered, he believed that a pregnant bear possessed special powers. There's a local indigenous legend that speaks of a mother bear spirit who blesses those who show her kindness and curses those who harm her. Victor's grandfather claimed that the bear who attacked him was pregnant, and he attributed all subsequent family misfortunes to her curse. Nathan shook his head in disbelief. So Victor thought by capturing Hope, he could somehow undo this curse? Not exactly, Doctor, Carter said grimly. He intended to wait until she gave birth and then kill both her and her cubs in some kind of twisted ritual to end the curse once and for all. But there's more to this story. She hesitated, glancing at Emma, who was now playing with a pen from the desk, oblivious to the conversation. Victor's journals mention a specific bear that his family had been tracking for years. A female with unusual coloring, a distinctive white patch of fur on her chest in the shape of a crescent moon. Olivia gasped. Hope has that exact marking. We noticed it during our first visit here. Dr. Carter nodded. Hope isn't just any bear. Based on her age and that marking, we believe she's the daughter of the bear that Victor's father shot 20 years ago. That bear also had cubs, but only one was found alive afterward, a female cub with the same crescent marking. That's impossible, Nathan whispered, the coincidence too extraordinary to accept easily. Wildlife researchers tagged that surviving cub, Dr. Carter continued, pulling out a faded wildlife conservation report. She grew up, left the area, but apparently returned years later. Victor recognized her marking and became convinced she was the embodiment of the curse. His journals are filled with rambling about how killing her and her cubs would finally free his family. Emma suddenly looked up, pointing at one of the photographs. Bear, she said clearly, her little finger resting on an image of a bear cub with a crescent moon marking on its chest. The adults fell silent, a chill running through the room at the child's innocent recognition. There's one more thing, Dr. Carter said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor wrote about a dream he had repeatedly in the weeks before you found Hope. He dreamed of a small child with the sun in her hair who would come to the bear's aid. He became convinced that if this child appeared, it would be a sign that the time for his ritual had come. Olivia instinctively reached for Emma, whose blonde hair gleamed like gold even in the office's muted lighting. You're saying he was waiting for someone like Emma? I'm saying the coincidences here go beyond rational explanation, Dr. Carter replied carefully. Indigenous people in this region have traditions about children with special connections to animals. They call them spirit-touched. They believe such children can communicate with animals in ways others cannot. Nathan, always the pragmatist, struggled to process this information. This is a lot to take in. I understand your skepticism, Doctor, Carter said. I'm a scientist. I deal in observable facts. But I've worked with wildlife for 20 years, and I've never seen an interaction like the one between your daughter and Hope. Never. As if on cue, Emma began to fuss, reaching toward the door. Bear, she repeated insistently. See Bear. The adults exchanged glances, the weight of Dr. Carter's revelations hanging in the air between them. Finally, Nathan nodded. Let's go see Hope. Whatever this connection is, curse, blessing, coincidence, it's real to Emma and Hope. They made their way to the observation area, where Hope and her cubs were enjoying the autumn sunshine. The moment they appeared at the viewing glass, Hope lifted her head, her keen nose somehow detecting their presence despite the barrier. Her eyes found Emma immediately, and she rose to her feet with a gentleness that belied her massive size. What happened next left even Dr. Carter speechless. Hope approached the glass, one of her cubs, little Emma, following curiously behind. The bear placed her paw against the barrier, directly opposite where human Emma stood with her own tiny hand pressed against the glass. For several heartbeats, bear and child gazed at each other, separated by glass but connected by something that transcended physical boundaries. Then, in a clear voice that stunned her parents, Emma spoke a full sentence for the first time in her life. Hope not scared anymore. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. Nathan found himself unable to speak. Dr. Carter hurriedly made notes, her scientific mind struggling to categorize what she was witnessing. That night, as they drove home, Nathan and Olivia discussed what they had learned in hushed tones while Emma slept peacefully in her car seat, her bear toy clutched tight against her chest. "Do you think there's really something to this legend?" Olivia asked, watching the moonlight play across her daughter's innocent face. "All these coincidences, it's hard to dismiss completely." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I've always believed in what I can see and touch. But what happened in that forest, and what's continuing to happen between Emma and Hope, there's something there that goes beyond normal explanation." Dr. Carter mentioned that Victor is being released next month, Olivia said, voicing the concern that had been gnawing at her since their meeting. His sentence was reduced for good behavior. Nathan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The sanctuary has restraining orders in place. He can't go anywhere near Hope or the sanctuary grounds. But what if he's still fixated on this curse, on Hope and her cubs? Olivia couldn't keep the fear from her voice. What if he comes looking for us, for Emma? "We'll be careful," Nathan assured her, though his own worry was evident. Dr. Carter said they're increasing security at the sanctuary, and we'll be vigilant at home. The next few weeks passed uneventfully, but an undercurrent of tension ran beneath the surface of their daily lives. Olivia found herself checking locked doors twice each night. Nathan installed a new security system. Both parents watched the woods behind their suburban home with newfound wariness. Their concern seemed unfounded until a chilly November evening when Olivia was bathing Emma. Nathan had just finished securing the house for the night when he noticed something unusual through the kitchen window. Movement at the edge of their property, where their yard met the wooded area beyond. Cautiously, he approached the window for a better look. A shadow detached itself from the trees, the unmistakable silhouette of a large animal on all fours. Nathan's heart raced as he fumbled for his phone to call for help, but before he could dial, the animal stepped into the pool of light cast by their back porch lamp. It was a bear, not Hope, but clearly an adult female black bear, regarding their house with an intensity that seemed almost purposeful. Around her neck was a splash of white fur in the distinctive shape of a crescent moon. Nathan stood frozen, phone in hand, as the bear rose onto her hind legs and stared directly at the house for several long seconds before dropping back to all fours and melting back into the darkness of the trees. Upstairs, Emma's delighted laughter rang out, followed by Olivia's soothing voice as she wrapped their daughter in a towel. Nathan remained rooted to the spot, unable to process what he had just witnessed. It was impossible for Hope to be here. She was secure in the sanctuary miles away, yet the marking had been unmistakable. His phone rang, startling him from his trance. The caller ID showed Doctor, Carter's number. "Nathan," her voice was urgent when he answered. "I just got an alert from Hope's tracking collar. Her vital signs are showing extreme agitation, but she's physically fine in her enclosure. It started exactly 3 minutes ago." "Is everything okay there?" Nathan swallowed hard, looking back at the now empty yard. I just saw a bear in our backyard. It had the same crescent marking as Hope." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Nathan thought the call had dropped. Finally, Dr. Carter spoke, her voice barely audible. "Nathan, that's not possible. Hope is here. I'm looking at her right now. And black bears with that specific marking are extraordinarily rare." "I know what I saw," Nathan insisted, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the November cold. "Nathan," Dr. Carter's voice became even more serious. "Victor Harmon was released yesterday, not next month as we were told. There was an administrative error with his paperwork. The sanctuary just received notification an hour ago." The implications of this news hit Nathan like a physical blow. "We need to get Emma somewhere safe," he said, already moving toward the stairs. "If he's found us—" "Wait," Dr. Carter interrupted. "The bear you saw, what was it doing?" "Just watching the house. Then it left." "Listen carefully, Doctor," Carter said, scientific detachment giving way to urgent belief. "The elders of the indigenous tribe here say the mother bear spirit sometimes appears as a warning or guardian when her favored ones are in danger. If what you saw was real—" A crash from upstairs cut through the conversation, followed immediately by Olivia's terrified scream and Emma's startled crying. Nathan dropped the phone and raced up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. He burst into the bathroom to find the window shattered, glass covering the floor. Olivia stood pressed against the far wall, clutching Emma wrapped in her towel, both of them unharmed but clearly terrified. "Someone was watching us through the window," Olivia gasped, her face pale with shock. "When I saw him, he broke the glass with something. Tried to reach in." I grabbed Emma and ran to the corner. Nathan quickly checked that they were unhurt before cautiously approaching the broken window. In the darkness beyond, he could see nothing, but a rustling in the bushes below suggested someone had just fled. "Call 911, he told Olivia, already moving to check the rest of the house. "Then go to our bedroom and lock the door. Don't come out until I say it's safe." As Olivia rushed to follow his instructions, Emma looked back over her mother's shoulder toward the broken window. Her expression was not one of fear, but of curious recognition. "Bear help," she said clearly, her young voice somehow steady in the midst of chaos. Police arrived within minutes, finding evidence that someone had climbed the large oak tree next to the house to reach the bathroom window. Muddy footprints led back to the woods, where they eventually lost the trail. There was no sign of either the intruder or the mysterious bear Nathan had seen, but the officers promised to patrol the area throughout the night. Unable to sleep, Nathan and Olivia sat in Emma's room, watching their daughter, who, remarkably, slumbered peacefully despite the evening's events. The stuffed bear toy remained clutched tightly in her arms. "We can't stay here," Olivia whispered. "Not if he's found us." Nathan nodded grimly. "I'll call my brother in the morning. We can stay with him for a while. His place is in the city, secure building, doorman." A soft buzzing interrupted them. Nathan's phone with a text from Doctor. "Carter, Hope has been pacing and agitated all night. Did something happen after we spoke?" After sharing details of the break-in attempt, they received Doctor Carter's immediate response. "Come to the sanctuary first thing tomorrow. We have secure accommodations on site for researchers. Stay there until we figure this out." The night passed without further incident, though neither parent slept. At first light, they packed essential belongings and prepared to leave. Nathan was loading the car when Olivia called him back into the house, her voice tight with fear. On their kitchen table lay a crudely carved wooden bear figurine, one that had definitely not been there the night before. Attached was a handwritten note. "The child speaks to bears. The curse lives in her now. Only one way to end it." Nathan immediately called the police, who arrived quickly to document the threat and take the evidence. How the intruder had entered their locked home without leaving any sign of forced entry remained a disturbing mystery. The officers urged them to leave immediately, while a search for Victor Harmon was organized. The drive to the wildlife sanctuary was tense, each set of headlights in the rearview mirror causing Nathan's hands to tighten on the wheel. Emma, sensing her parents' anxiety, remained unusually quiet in her car seat, her eyes frequently drawn to the woods that lined the highway. They arrived at the sanctuary just as the morning staff were beginning their duties. Dr. Carter met them at the gate, her face lined with concern. She led them quickly to a small but comfortable cabin used by visiting researchers, situated within the sanctuary's secured perimeter. "You'll be safe here," she assured them, helping them bring in their bags. "We have 24-hour security, and I've alerted everyone to be on the lookout for Victor." Once they were settled, Dr. Carter suggested they visit Hope, believing that seeing the bear might help calm Emma, who had grown increasingly restless upon arriving at the sanctuary. The moment they entered the observation area, Hope rose to attention, moving to the glass with purpose. All three of her cubs followed, now significantly larger than they had been months ago. The bear's behavior was different today, more alert, almost protective as she positioned herself between her cubs and the observation glass, her intelligent eyes scanning beyond the Parker family as if searching for threats. Emma immediately placed her hand on the glass, and Hope mirrored the gesture with her paw as had become their custom. What happened next, however, was entirely new. Hope made a series of low, rumbling sounds, vocalizations that seemed purposeful rather than random. Emma tilted her head, listening intently, then turned to her parents with an urgency that seemed far beyond her young age. "Bear says bad man coming, hide now." Before Nathan or Olivia could react to their daughter's alarming statement, alarms began blaring throughout the sanctuary. Red emergency lights flashed, and a voice over the loudspeaker called for immediate evacuation of all visitors and non-essential personnel. Dr. Carter's phone rang, and the color drained from her face as she listened to the caller. Security spotted Victor Harmon cutting through the perimeter fence on the north side, she reported grimly after hanging up. "Somehow he knew you were here. Police are on their way, but we need to move you to a more secure location immediately." They hurried from the Bear enclosure, Dr. Carter leading them toward the administrative building at the center of the sanctuary. Emma began to cry, reaching back toward Hope, who was now pacing anxiously in her enclosure, her agitation visible to all. "Bear says no," Emma sobbed, struggling in Olivia's arms. "No building." "Bad." Dr. Carter hesitated, glancing at the distraught child. "What does she mean?" Nathan shook his head, torn between dismissing his daughter's words as childish fear and the unsettling pattern of Emma's seemingly impossible communication with Hope. "Emma, sweetie, we need to go where it's safe." "Not safe," Emma insisted, her small face contorted with distress. "Bear says trap." At that moment, a staff member ran up to Dr. Carter, his expression urgent. "We can't find Marcus," he reported, referring to the head of security. "He's not responding to radio calls, and the police say someone used his access code to disable the perimeter alarms before the breach was detected visually." A cold realization dawned on all of them. If security had been compromised, nowhere in the sanctuary might be truly safe. And if Victor had inside help, where does your security team normally take visitors during emergencies? Nathan asked suddenly. "The administrative building," Dr. Carter answered, her eyes widening with understanding. "It's standard protocol." Olivia clutched Emma tighter. "Then that's exactly where he'd expect us to go." "Bear says follow cubs," Emma said clearly, her tears subsiding as quickly as they had begun. "Bear knows safe place." The adults exchanged uncertain glances, the rational part of their minds struggling against what seemed like an impossible suggestion. Yet the events of the past months had pushed them all beyond the boundaries of normal explanation. Hope's enclosure connects to an emergency release area, Dr. Carter said slowly, making a decision that went against all standard protocols. "It's designed to evacuate animals if there's a fire or other disaster. It leads to a secure holding zone with access to the rehabilitation forest beyond." "You're suggesting we follow a bear?" Olivia asked incredulously. Dr. Carter's expression was deadly serious. "I'm suggesting we trust Emma's connection to Hope. Something extraordinary is happening here, and right now, our normal security measures may be compromised." Another alarm blared, this one signaling a fire alert in the eastern section of the sanctuary, a likely diversion created by Victor to draw away security personnel. With time running out, they made their decision. Dr. Carter led them back to a service entrance of Hope's enclosure, using her emergency override code to enter a small observation room that connected to the release corridor. Through a reinforced window, they could see Hope and her cubs already waiting at the internal gate that would allow them access to the release area. "I'm going to open both gates, Doctor," Carter explained, her fingers hesitating over the controls. "The outer one leads to a secure pathway through the rehabilitation forest. If Emma is right, if Hope is truly trying to help, she should lead her cubs that way, and we can follow at a safe distance." "And if she's wrong?" Nathan asked, the protective father in him still resistant to placing his family's safety in the paws of a wild animal. "Then we immediately retreat and lock ourselves in this observation room until police arrive," Dr. Carter replied firmly. "I won't risk your lives on a hunch, no matter how extraordinary." With a deep breath, she activated the release protocol. Warning lights flashed as the internal gate slid open. Hope immediately ushered her cubs through, then paused, looking back toward the observation room window where the humans watched. Her intelligent eyes seemed to fix directly on Emma, and she made that same purposeful vocalization they had heard earlier. "Bear says hurry," Emma translated, tugging at her mother's sleeve with surprising urgency. Dr. Carter opened the second gate, revealing the release corridor that the bears had already entered. "Stay behind me. Move quickly but quietly," she instructed, leading them into the passage. The heavy door sealed automatically behind them, locking with a reassuring click. Ahead, Hope and her cubs moved with deliberate care, the mother bear frequently looking back to ensure the humans were following. They navigated a series of branching corridors, eventually emerging into the rehabilitation forest, a secured natural area within the sanctuary where recovering animals were gradually reintroduced to wild conditions. Hope led them along a nearly invisible game trail, moving deeper into the forest with confident familiarity. The sound of sirens grew distant behind them, suggesting the police had arrived at the main sanctuary buildings. "Where is she taking us?" Olivia whispered, struggling to keep her footing on the uneven forest floor while carrying Emma. "There's an old research cabin about a mile in," Dr. Carter replied quietly. "It's not on any current maps of the sanctuary. We haven't used it in years." Sure enough, after 20 minutes of careful navigation through the dense forest, a small wooden structure appeared ahead, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. Hope stopped at the edge of the small clearing, her cubs gathering around her legs, and turned her gaze meaningfully toward the cabin. Dr. Carter cautiously approached the weathered door, finding it unlocked. The interior was dusty but intact, a simple one-room shelter with basic furniture and emergency supplies. "We should be safe here until the police sweep the sanctuary," she said, ushering Nathan and Olivia inside. "No one would think to look for us here." As Nathan helped secure the cabin's windows, Olivia set Emma down near the door, where the child immediately pressed her face to the glass pane, watching Hope and her cubs still waiting at the forest's edge. "Bear standing guard," Emma announced, with the simple confidence of a child stating an obvious fact. The adults traded glances, the reality of their situation settling in. They had just been led to safety through a forest by a mother bear, following the intuitive translation provided by a toddler. The world, as they had understood it, seemed to be reshaping itself around them. Hours passed. Dr. Carter maintained intermittent communication with sanctuary staff via text messages, learning that police had apprehended someone near the administrative building, but it wasn't Victor Harmon. It was Marcus, the head of security, bound and unconscious, apparently attacked when he discovered the perimeter breach. Victor himself remained at large, though police were conducting a thorough search of the entire sanctuary grounds. The staff had been evacuated, and trained police units with tracking dogs were methodically covering every acre of the property. As evening approached, Hope and her cubs remained vigilant outside the cabin, the mother bear occasionally circling the perimeter as if patrolling for threats. Inside, Emma had finally succumbed to exhaustion, napping on a small cot while her parents and Dr. Carter spoke in hushed tones. "The indigenous elders would say your daughter is a spirit-touched," Dr. Carter explained, sharing what she had learned from local tribal historians. "They believe certain children are born with the ability to communicate with animal spirits, particularly those that have a connected history with their family." "But we had no history with bears before finding Hope," Olivia pointed out. Dr. Carter's expression became thoughtful. Perhaps the connection began when Emma showed compassion to Hope in her moment of greatest need. The legends speak of bonds formed through acts of mercy or courage. Nathan, who had been watching the forest through a small window, suddenly stiffened. "Someone's coming," he whispered urgently. Through the gathering dusk, a human figure moved through the trees, approaching not from the direction of the sanctuary buildings but from the deeper forest beyond. The person moved with purpose, clearly familiar with the terrain. Hope immediately rose to her full height, placing herself between the approaching figure and the cabin, her cubs retreating behind her massive form. Her warning growl was audible even through the cabin walls. "It's him," Nathan said grimly, recognizing Victor's bearded face even in the dim light. "And he has a rifle." Dr. Carter reached for her phone to alert police, but the signal had deteriorated in the deepening evening. "No service," she reported tensely. Victor stopped about 50 yards from the cabin, his attention focused entirely on Hope. The standoff was clear. To reach the humans, he would need to get past the bear. "You don't belong here, demon." Victor's voice carried across the clearing, his rifle raised toward Hope. "You and your curse end tonight." Hope stood her ground, another growl rumbling from deep in her chest. Her cubs huddled behind her, frightened but trusting in their mother's protection. Inside the cabin, Emma suddenly woke, sitting upright on the cot. "Bear protecting," she said clearly, her eyes wide and alert. "Man wants to hurt bear." The adults watched in helpless horror as Victor took aim at Hope. Nathan searched desperately for a weapon, finding nothing more dangerous than a rusty fire poker leaning against the old wood stove. "We have to do something," Olivia whispered frantically. "He's going to kill her." At that moment, Emma slipped from the cot and, before anyone could stop her, unlatched the cabin door and pushed it open. The adults lunged to grab her, but the child was already stepping onto the porch, her small figure illuminated by the last rays of sunset. "No hurt, Bear," Emma called out, her high, clear voice carrying across the clearing. "Bear good." Victor froze, his rifle still trained on Hope, but his attention now divided. "The child," he murmured, just loudly enough to be heard. "The one from my dreams." Nathan rushed onto the porch, placing himself in front of Emma, while Olivia and Dr. Carter followed close behind. "Victor, put the gun down," Nathan called out, trying to keep his voice steady despite his terror. "The police are coming. This ends now." Victor's weathered face twisted into a grimace. "You don't understand. None of you understand. This isn't about the bear, it's about the curse. It's passed to your child now. I've seen it in my dreams for months. The only way to end it is to end the line, both hers and yours." He shifted his aim from Hope to Nathan and Emma, his intention chillingly clear. "I'm sorry," he said, and he seemed to mean it. "But this has to end." What happened next occurred so quickly that later, none of the humans could agree on the exact sequence of events. Hope charged forward with surprising speed for an animal her size. Victor fired, the shot going wide as the bear's massive form crashed into him. The rifle flew from his hands, landing several yards away in the underbrush. Hope stood over the fallen man, her jaws inches from his throat, a growl vibrating through her entire body. Victor lay perfectly still, terror evident in his wide eyes as he faced the creature he had tormented and the death he had planned for others. Emma stepped forward again, despite Nathan's attempt to hold her back. "Bear says no more hurt," she announced solemnly. "No more fear." Hope looked toward the child, then back at Victor. For a breathless moment it seemed the bear would exact the ultimate revenge. Instead, she backed away slowly, returning to her cubs while keeping her eyes fixed on the fallen man. The distant sound of police radios and dogs broke through the tense silence. The search teams were approaching. Victor remained on the ground, seemingly in shock at his survival. "It's over, Doctor," Carter said quietly. "The police will take him now." But Emma shook her head, her expression surprisingly serious for one so young. "Not over," she said, pointing to Victor. "Man still scared inside. Bear still scared inside." Understanding dawned on Dr. Carter's face. "The curse he believes in, its fear passed down through generations. His grandfather's fear became hatred, which he passed to his son and then to Victor, and the bears learned to fear humans in return. "How does it end, then?" Olivia asked, gathering Emma back into her arms. Emma looked up at her mother with innocent wisdom. "No more scared," she said simply. "No more hurt, just help." As the police arrived to take Victor into custody, Emma waved goodbye to Hope and her cubs, who retreated to the safety of the deeper forest. The bear paused at the tree line, looking back one last time at the human child who had somehow bridged two worlds. In the years that followed, the story of Emma and Hope became a cornerstone of the sanctuary's conservation program. Victor, receiving the psychological help he had needed for decades, eventually became an advocate for bear conservation, working to undo the damage caused by generations of his family. Emma grew into a remarkable young woman with an uncanny ability to work with troubled animals, though her explicit communication with them faded as she grew older. The sanctuary established a special program allowing her regular visits with Hope and her cubs, documenting their ongoing bond for scientific study. On Emma's 18th birthday, she hiked alone to a special observation point overlooking the section of forest now permanently designated as Hope's protected territory. The bear was aging now, her cubs grown and dispersed to start their own families, but she still recognized the young woman who had once been a fearless toddler. As Emma sat quietly watching, Hope emerged from the trees, approaching closer than she did with any other human. She carried something in her mouth, a small branch with fresh berries still attached. Gently, she placed it on the ground before Emma, then sat back on her haunches, regarding the young woman with the same intelligent gaze that had connected them years before. "Thank you, old friend," Emma whispered, tears filling her eyes as she understood the gift for what it was. Not just berries, but trust, connection, and the end of a cycle of fear that had bound their fates together. Hope nodded her massive head once, as if in understanding, then turned and vanished back into the protective embrace of her forest home. In that sacred moment of connection, both human and bear knew a fundamental truth. Compassion had indeed broken a generations-old curse, not through magic, but through the simple, powerful act of seeing beyond fear to recognize the shared spirit in all living beings. 20 years later, Emma Parker Williams stood at the edge of the same forest clearing, her own 5-year-old daughter, Lily's small hand clasped tightly in hers. The wildlife sanctuary had grown into an internationally renowned conservation center, with Emma serving as its lead behaviorist and advocate. "Is today the day I get to meet her, Mommy?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. She had heard the story of Hope countless times. It was her favorite bedtime tale, but had never been allowed to visit this special part of the sanctuary until now. Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "If she comes, sweetheart. Hope is very old now, and she doesn't visit the clearing as often as she used to. But she'll come for me," Lily said with the unwavering confidence of a child. "You told me she would know." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. Her parents, now silver-haired but still deeply involved with the sanctuary's educational programs, had noticed the signs in Lily almost from birth. The same unusual connection with animals, the same fearlessness and intuition that Emma had displayed as a baby. The family legacy, it seemed, continued. The sun filtered through the autumn leaves, casting dappled golden light across the forest floor. Emma had chosen this day carefully, the anniversary of that first extraordinary meeting between a chained bear and a fearless toddler that had changed countless lives. They waited in peaceful silence, Lily occasionally humming softly to herself. Emma had learned over the years that patience was essential when communing with wild creatures. Hope had not been seen by sanctuary staff for nearly 3 months, and Emma had prepared Lily for the possibility that the aging bear might not appear. Just as the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, a rustling in the underbrush caught their attention. Emma felt her daughter's hand tighten in hers, but there was no fear in the gesture, only excitement. From between the ancient trees, a massive shape emerged slowly. Hope had grown thinner with age, her once glossy coat now grizzled with silver, but the distinctive crescent moon marking on her chest remained clearly visible. She moved with the deliberate care of an elderly matriarch, her eyes, still bright with intelligence, immediately finding the two humans waiting at the forest's edge. "It's her," Lily whispered in awe, her voice trembling with emotion. "She's so beautiful." Hope approached cautiously, stopping several yards away. Her gaze moved from Emma to Lily, studying the child with intense curiosity. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes as she witnessed the recognition dawning in the old bear's expression. The same recognition Hope had shown her all those years ago. "She remembers," Emma whispered, emotion catching in her throat. To Emma's surprise, Hope was not alone. From the shadows behind her emerged another bear, younger, stronger, with the same distinctive crescent marking. One of Hope's granddaughters, Emma realized, now fully grown. And behind her, two small cubs peeked curiously at the humans from behind their mother's protective form. "The circle continues," Emma murmured, understanding washing over her like a gentle wave. Hope was passing on not just her lineage, but the connection that had been forged between their families. Lily released her mother's hand and, before Emma could stop her, took 3 small steps forward. Emma's heart leapt into her throat, not from fear, but from the overwhelming déjà vu of seeing her daughter repeat the same fearless approach she herself had made as a child. Hope remained still, watching. The younger bear made a soft sound of concern, but Hope quieted her with a gentle rumble. Lily stopped at a respectful distance and, with ceremonial solemnity, raised her small hand, palm outward. Hope studied the gesture, then slowly, painfully rose to her hind legs for just a moment, a posture she had not taken in years according to sanctuary records. She extended one massive paw in return, not touching the child but mirroring her gesture across the space between them. In that moment, something profound passed between them, an unspoken promise, a continuation of the bond that had healed so much pain and brought so much good into the world. "Thank you," Lily said softly, addressing the bear with the natural directness of a child. "For saving my mommy, and for saving yourself, and for all the bears who are safe now because of you." Hope lowered herself back to all fours, the effort clearly taxing. She made a soft chuffing sound, then turned to her granddaughter and great-grandcubs. With a final, lingering look at Emma and Lily, she led her family back toward the deeper forest. Just before disappearing among the trees, the younger bear paused, looking back at Lily with curious intelligence. The cubs mimicked their mother, their small faces peering back at the human child with innocent wonder. "They'll remember me," Lily said with certainty, as the bears vanished into the gathering dusk, "just like Hope remembered you." Emma knelt beside her daughter, drawing her into a tight embrace as tears flowed freely down her cheeks. "Yes, they will," she whispered into Lily's hair. "And when you have children someday, and they have children, the bears will remember them too." As they walked hand in hand back toward the sanctuary buildings where Nathan and Olivia waited to hear about their encounter, Emma felt a profound sense of completion. What had begun as a terrifying moment in a forest clearing had blossomed into a legacy of compassion and connection that would continue long after both she and Hope had returned to the earth they shared. The golden light of sunset filtered through the trees, turning the forest path into a luminous corridor. Behind them, the distant sound of a contented bear's rumble echoed through the trees. Not a goodbye, Emma realized, but a promise. Some bonds, once formed through pure compassion, never truly break. They simply transform, flowing like an endless river through generations of hearts, both human and wild, connecting us all in the great, mysterious circle of life that encompasses every living creature on earth. In that sacred understanding, the true miracle of Emma and Hope's story lived on, not as legend or fairy tale, but as a living testament to the extraordinary power of the simplest human gift, the innocent, boundless capacity of a child's heart to love without fear. And in that love, both families, human and bear, had found not just redemption, but a shared destiny that would shape the forest and all who entered it for generations to come.